A frozen moor stretches beneath the pale light of dawn, its ground hardened by frost. From sharpened wooden stakes, thick, fetid smoke curls upward into the biting cold air, marking grim scenes of justice long since enacted. The landscape is silent but heavy with dread, an unforgiving testament to law carved from ice and cruelty. Nearby, a gallows made of rough-hewn timber stands alone, its weathered noose swaying slowly in the cold wind. The wood is splintered and worn, the fibers of the rope frayed by countless executions. Beneath this silent sentinel, no mercy awaited those condemned to meet fate by hanging. A close shot reveals a blood-stained axe blade, its edge chipped and darkened from use. The cold steel catches the faint light as a single drop of blood falls, a stark symbol of the brutal punishments that maintained order through fear and pain. The scene fills with sound, the sickening thud of flesh striking wood, muffled sobs of the condemned, tense murmurs from gathered onlookers, and overhead the solitary caw of a raven echoes through the stillness. Tonight we uncover punishments so savage, even dragons would weep. Flames flicker and gutter in a crude courtyard arena, casting shifting shadows on frozen ground where frost crunches beneath restless feet. The bitter cold sharpens the urgency of the gathering as villagers, faces etched with grim resolve, circle the center. Their breath rising in icy clouds under torchlight. Justice burns bright on this frozen night. Dragged forward in heavy chains, Gunnar, the outlaw, stumbles, eyes wide with terror. His face is marked by desperation, every faltering step weighed down by the weight of his crimes and the grim fate that awaits. The rattling of iron links echoes in the cold Aran outlaw condemned by law and fear. Eagle the executioner stands silent but focused, adjusting the leather bracer on his forearm. His axe gleams sharply in the torchlight, its blade an instrument of unyielding justice. The hand of fate wields the axe tonight. Phratis, the lawwoman, steps forward, her voice clear and unflinching as she reads the rune-carved sentence aloud. Outlawry, dismemberment, and the blood eagle shall be your end. Murmurs ripple through the crowd, some offer prayers, others brace for what's to come. The law's harsh judgment seals his doom. Gunnar collapses to his knees, overwhelmed. The crowd parts silently as a deep drum begins its slow, relentless thumper heartbeat, marking the rhythm of death. The heartbeat of justice echoes through the night. Egil raises his axe high, poised for the fatal strike. Gunnar's scream pierces the frozen silence, raw and desperate, before fading into darkness. The screen cuts to black, leaving only the drumbeat lingering. In this brutal rite, mercy has no place. A sterile courtroom fills with quiet tension as a defendant listens intently to a litany of formal charges. Judges sit in orderly rows, faces composed yet serious, embodying a legal process defined by rules and restraint. Today, justice is meted out behind polished walls and legal codes. Cut to a news broadcast detailing the grim protocol of lethal injection. Prison guards, clad in hazmat suits, prepare the chamber with precise, clinical motions. The sterile environment contrasts sharply with the violence it conceals. Modern executions are controlled, sanitized, and hidden from public view. Graphics reveal that only 23 countries worldwide continue to practice capital punishment. This shrinking number reflects changing global attitudes toward state-sanctioned death. The death penalty is shrinking, morality and law evolving. Meanwhile, 70% of Western nations have outlawed all forms of torture, marking significant legal and ethical progress. Footage shows human rights rallies and official signings of anti-torture legislation. Pain as punishment is outlawed. Society demands dignity. Faces in courtrooms and protest gatherings reveal visible distress as citizens react to portrayals of violence and punishment. People hold signs, light candles, some visibly shaken. We recoil from cruelty, yet history shows different norms. In stark contrast, the Viking world embraced public, savage punishments as a tool of law and order. Open-air executions were community events, designed to instill fear and maintain control. For Vikings, terror was justice made visible. Norse legal codes embedded harsh penalties within social values. Honor, vengeance, and collective responsibility were paramount. Manuscripts reveal rigid laws. Oral storytelling preserved these harsh truths. Their laws were harsh, but they were laws nonetheless. As we reflect, a question emerges. How does modern justice reconcile with the brutal legacies of the past? Fade between the calm courthouse and the stark Viking execution grounds. Justice evolves, but the shadow of fear remains. Viking punishments, from outlawry and mutilation to the infamous blood eagle, were not random acts of cruelty, but a meticulously codified system of social control and belief. These harsh measures functioned to uphold societal norms, enforce order, and maintain cosmic balance within their communities. Far from savage chaos, Viking justice was a precise, brutal instrument of control designed to protect both the living and the spiritual order. Central to this system were the Gulathing and Frostathing laws, among the earliest legal frameworks in Scandinavia. These codices detailed punishments such as exile, disfigurement, and execution, prescribing consequences with clarity and severity. Saga narratives recount how these laws were enforced, chronicling famous cases where justice was swift and uncompromising. These laws bound communities with unyielding rules. Punishment was the backbone of societal stability. The most notorious punishment, the blood eagle, has sparked debate among scholars. Described as a ritualistic execution involving the carving of wings into the victim's back, its historical accuracy is contested. Was it a literal practice or a symbolic metaphor for vengeance and power? Reenactments and anatomical illustrations highlight the grisly nature of the alleged ritual. Yet some argue it serves more as myth than documented fact. Archaeological discoveries add complexity to this discussion. Skeletal remains bearing unusual cut marks and weapon-inflicted injuries have been unearthed, offering possible physical evidence for saga accounts. These bones whisper stories, sometimes confirming brutal truths buried in myth. Though scholarly debate continues over interpretation and context, extreme punishments served broader cultural purposes. They reinforced social cohesion by deterring transgressions and upholding honor, while symbolizing a cosmic balance between order and chaos. Historians and legal anthropologists emphasize the ritualistic and political dimensions of these acts, underscoring that Viking justice was as much about belief as enforcement. Understanding their system means confronting a world where brutality and spirituality were inseparable, where law was both sword and sacred covenant. The ancient parchment crackles softly as it unfurls beside the flickering hearthlight. Inscribed with runes, the Gulathing and Frostathing laws form the foundation of Viking legal tradition. These codes were far more than simple rules. They defined the fabric of social order, prescribing justice and punishment across communities. Within their faded script lies the balance of fear and fairness, structuring society through clear consequences. As hands trace the worn letters, the laws reveal a world where honor, kinship, and retribution intertwined, shaping not just behavior but belief itself. These ancient laws weren't mere words, they were the backbone of order, justice, and fear. Viking justice operated on a calibrated scale, where fines, or wergeld, competed with harsher corporal punishments. The social standing of the offender dictated the severity of consequences. Nobles could often pay substantial fines to settle disputes, preserving their honor and avoiding physical harm. In contrast, commoners faced brutal mutilations or exile for similar offenses. This system ensured that justice reinforced societal hierarchies, making punishment not only about the crime but the individual's place within the community. Justice was scaled not by the crime alone, but by the offender's place in the social web. Outlawry was the harshest verdict a Viking could endure. Branding 1 man of the woods. Declared outside the protection of law, the outlaw lost all rights and support, condemned to wander in wilderness or face death by exposure or violence. No longer part of society, these exiles became targets and survivors alike, forced into banditry or despair. The sentence severed bonds of kin and community, transforming the condemned into living ghosts within their own land. To be outlawed was to vanish from society, left to the mercy of wilderness and enemies alike. Punishments extended beyond death into the realm of the visible and permanent. Ear-cropping marked thieves, while noses lashing branded oath-breakers. Such mutilations inflicted lasting shame and social stigma, turning the body into a living record of disgrace. These wounds were more than penalties. They served as warnings to others, reminders etched in flesh that justice was inescapable. Skeletal remains bear silent testimony to these acts, with healed fractures revealing survivors who carried their scars as public marks of dishonor. Each cut was a warning, etched in flesh, visible proof of disgrace. Archaeological excavations in eastern burial mounds uncover skulls with healed fractures and ribs bearing unusual cut marks, offering physical evidence of violence and ritual. Forensic reconstructions reveal the extent of trauma sustained, sometimes consistent with saga descriptions of punishments or battles. These skeletal remains provide a vital counterpoint to literary sources, narrating stories of suffering, endurance, and cultural practices often omitted or mythologized. Bones tell stories that sagas sometimes omit, stories of pain, survival, and ritual. The blood eagle stands among the most grisly of Viking punishments, described in sagas as a ritual execution involving the carving of wings by splitting the victim's ribs. However, forensic analyses raise questions about whether such marks are evidence of ritualistic killing or natural post-mortem damage. Dramatic reenactments portray the horror, but the historical truth remains elusive, caught between myth and possible fact. This brutal symbol encapsulates the tension between legend and reality in Viking justice, a grisly myth or grim reality. The truth remains shrouded in blood and bone. Justice in Viking society was not a private affair, but a public spectacle enacted in thingcourts, where crowds gathered to witness punishment. Drums and chants heightened the atmosphere, transforming retribution into civic ritual designed to instill fear and reinforce communal norms. Carved, steely, commemorated executions, marking places where justice was served and deterrence made visible. In this arena, law was theater, and the brutal display served both to punish the guilty and unify the observers. Justice was a spectacle, fear made visible and communal. Legal historian Dr. Helga explains how Viking law fused governance with performance, turning punishments into social rituals that reaffirmed order. Osteoarchaeologist Dr. Magnus Haraldsson highlights skeletal evidence supporting ritualized dismemberment, revealing layers of meaning beyond mere violence. These experts peel back history's layers, exposing a justice system where brutality and symbolism were inseparable, functioning both as enforcement and communal expression. Scholars peel back layers of history to reveal a justice system, both brutal and symbolic. A rust-streaked axe rests solemnly atop a rune-inscribed slab, the dimming light casting long shadows over symbols of law and violence. This powerful image captures the essence of Viking justice, raw, uncompromising, yet deeply embedded in cultural identity. Echoes of distant battle drums resonate as the scene fades, leaving the viewer with a stark reminder. In this brutal world, justice was forged with iron and fear etched forever in the land and the bones of its people. As dawn breaks over the expansive Thingstead, villagers begin to gather, their breath visible in the crisp morning air. Smoke curls lazily from hearth-fires set among scattered booths where traders prepare their goods. Noble chieftains arrive in finely woven cloaks, their presence commanding attention as the crowd murmurs and exchanges news. The buzz of anticipation builds. Today's assembly is both a social gathering and a forum for justice. Here, law, power, and community collide beneath the open sky, each participant aware of their role in preserving order. The Thingstead was the heart of Viking justice where law, power, and community collided. Freydis steps forward, the lord carved with ancient runes firm in her grasp. Her stern gaze sweeps the assembly, commanding immediate silence and respect. Known for her unwavering judgment, she embodies the authority of Viking law in a world ruled by strength and honor. Her voice cuts through the hush, setting the tone for the day's proceedings. With steady hands and unflinching resolve, she wields the pen of justice, turning oral tradition into enforceable decree. In a world ruled by strength, Freydis wielded the pen of justice. Sigrid rises, her posture steady despite the weight of the moment. She recounts catching Bjorn, the thief, in her granary under the cover of night, her voice clear and resolute. Eyes in the assembly fix upon her, attuned to every word, knowing that truth spoken here carries consequences. Her testimony is a vital thread in the fabric of communal justice, ensuring that crimes do not go unchallenged. Truth was spoken aloud here, under watchful eyes and sharpened ears. Bjorn steps forward, desperation etched on his face as he offers Wergold payment meant to atone for his theft. His voice trembles as he pleads for mercy, appealing to the assembly's sense of balance. Freydis listens carefully, weighing the offered compensation against the community's need for order and deterrence. In this moment, justice balances mercy with societal needs, enforcing consequences while preserving harmony. Justice balanced mercy with societal order. Egil moves with practiced efficiency, chains rattling as he prepares Bjorn for execution. The gleam of his axe catches the sunlight, casting a cold reflection on the somber faces around him. The crowd tightens, the mood darkening as the gravity of the sentence settles. Egil is the hand of Lawharsh, inevitable, necessary in this world where order must be maintained at all costs. The executioner was the hand of the Lawharsh but necessary. Bjorn's hands are bound, the noose adjusted and tightened with deliberate care. Silence falls over the Thingstead. The tension is palpable. Then, with a sudden snap, life is extinguished. Faces of villagers reflect solemn acceptance and the stark reality of justice enforced. Public executions serve not only to punish but to instill fear and uphold social order. Public executions enforced law and instilled fear. As the crowd disperses, hushed conversations fill the air, warnings shared in cautious tones. Reminders of the fragile social contract. Fear and respect mingle, binding the community through shared experience and collective memory. Justice here is a message delivered beyond the scaffold, a force that shapes behavior and preserves peace. Justice was as much a social message as punishment. Phratis plants the law rod firmly into the earth, a tangible act signaling the restoration of order. Dust rises with the impact, marking the authority of law renewed. Her gaze surveys the thinning crowd, reaffirming her role as guardian of justice and societal stability. With each decree, law's power was renewed. The lingering aroma of cooking fires weaves through the air, contrasting sharply with the metallic temps of blood and leather. Flames flicker against charred wood, casting dancing shadows over the assembly's remains. This mingling of scents captures the visceral reality of Viking justice where life's warmth meets death's chill. The air held both life's warmth and death's chill. The twang of tightened leather straps punctuates the quiet, accompanied by the caw of a lone raven circling overhead. The bird alights on a timber post, its call echoing across the courtyard, a somber reminder of mortality and fate. Nature itself seems to bear witness to the final judgment passed this day. Nature bore witness to the final judgment. Phratis turns from the empty scaffold, her eyes hardened by the burden of responsibility. Her expression blends duty with a quiet sorrow, embodying the complex weight of delivering justice. In her gaze rests the intertwined fate of law and life, the delicate balance she must uphold for the community's survival. In her gaze, the weight of law and life entwined. The communal participation in this process reinforces social bonds and collective responsibility. Villagers exchange knowing glances and whispered affirmations, each acknowledging their shared stake in maintaining order. Justice here is a pact, a collective act that binds the group to a shared destiny. Justice was a communal pact binding all to shared fate. As the sun sets over the empty Thingstead, benches and abandoned weapons bathed in golden light, the cycle of law and life continues unbroken. In this harsh landscape, Viking justice preserves a fragile social balance, maintaining order through ritual and resolve. In the harsh light of Viking justice, society found fragile balance. At dawn, warriors and villagers gather beneath a pale sky, their faces streaked with charcoal and ash. These markings are more than decoration, they signal ritual readiness and a shared identity rooted in collective fate. Around a wooden stake, solemn expressions reflect the weight of what is to come. As the rising sun casts long shadows over the assembly, this moment is charged with meaning, where the boundary between life and death, justice and vengeance, blurs. In Viking culture, ritual paint was more than war. Painted was a symbol of shared fate and collective reckoning. In Viking society, honor was the foundation of all social relations. Any insult or injury demanded compensation to restore balance, whether through payment or punishment. Elders and chieftains convened to weigh disputes, considering oaths broken and swords drawn. This was no simple matter of law. Dishonor cut deeper than flesh, fracturing communal trust and inviting chaos. Justice served as the remedy, ensuring wounds to reputation were healed and social order preserved. Dishonor was a wound deeper than flesh. Punishment was society's way to heal. Punishments like mutilation did more than cause physical pain, they erased a person's place in the community. Losing an ear, nose, or finger was a permanent mark of disgrace, signaling that the offender was no longer trustworthy or whole. Villagers whispered behind cupped hands, and the scarred bore silent testimony to their fall from grace. In this way, shame functioned as social death, severing bonds and limiting participation in communal life. To lose an ear was to lose your voice in the community. Public executions and punishments were not merely acts of retribution, but communal ceremonies that released pent-up fear, anger, and guilt. Crowds gathered at the Thingstead, voices rising in chants as sentences were pronounced and carried out. This brutal theatre served as a psychological cleansing, allowing the community to confront danger collectively and reaffirm solidarity. Justice was theatre, and, in its brutal dance, the community found release. Some punishments were deliberately timed to coincide with religious festivals, linking law enforcement to divine sanction. Torches illuminated winter solstice gatherings, where rituals of cosmic balance intertwined with acts of legal judgment. These moments reinforced the sacredness of law and its role in maintaining harmony between the earthly and spiritual realms. Law and faith wove together in a tapestry of cosmic balance. With no formal police or prisons, reputation and fear maintained social order. The threat of exile, being cast into wilderness solitude, was a fate worse than death. Those banished faced starvation and violence, cut off from protection and support. This ever-present fear kept villagers aligned with communal norms and deterred wrongdoing. The fear of being cast out was a fate worse than death. Ritualized punishment was a repeated social performance, a solemn reminder of the rules and consequences. Drums beat steadily as a condemned man was led to the gallows, the crowd falling silent in shared understanding. This repetition sacralized law, embedding obedience deeply in the community psyche. Repetition made the rules sacred and obedience essential. Dr. Ingrid explains how. In a world of scarce resources and constant threat, public brutality fostered social cohesion. Punishment was not just justice, but a survival mechanism that united people by reinforcing shared values and deterring conflict. This brutal display served to maintain fragile order amid chaos. Punishment was as much about survival as justice. Neuropsychologist Dr. Leifstrom discusses how the terror elicited by harsh punishments binds groups through shared trauma. Communal fear activates brain regions responsible for social trust and cooperation, effectively using terror as a social glue. Shared trauma forges bonds that strengthen group resilience and cohesion. Shared terror created shared trust, order forged in fire and fear. In the quiet that follows a public punishment, village life resumes. Children play, elders speak in low tones, and the fragile social fabric holds through brutality and ritual. Vikings transformed chaos into law, outrage into order. Their harsh justice created a framework where society could endure, bound by shared fear and collective purpose. In the fury of their rituals, Vikings crafted the fragile architecture of order, binding chaos with cruelty and society with shared fear. Inside the chieftain's longhouse, a single torch flickers, casting shifting shadows on wooden beams and carved benches where nobles gather. The air is thick with smoke and whispered schemes. Here, power extended beyond the edge of swords. It was woven through secrets, alliances, and unspoken threats. In this dimly lit hall, decisions were made that rippled through villages and forests alike. Beneath smoke and wood, the true grip of power was forged not with swords, but with secrets. Blood feuds threatened to spiral endlessly, tearing families apart. To prevent this chaos, Wurgold payments were enforced compensation, balancing justice with the threat of violent reprisal. Kin groups met at carved oak tables, fingers tightening round exchanged silver coins. The lawwoman acted as mediator, her presence crucial in ensuring settlements held, restoring fragile peace. Her role balanced justice with the looming threat of retribution, calming flames before they could consume whole communities. The Landhöfer were oath-sworn deputies charged with patrolling rugged roads, enforcing curfews, and collecting taxes. Mounted and vigilant, they stopped travelers to check documents, their authority backed by the chieftain's mandate. They were both eyes and fists in the shadowed wild, extending law's reach beyond village centers. These deputies ensured order where armies could not, embodying the king's power in places where silence might otherwise breed defiance. News traveled swiftly on the tongues of schools, traders, and traveling craftsmen. Tales of punishments and retribution spread like wildfire at markets and feasts, weaponizing reputation as a deterrent. Listeners leaned in as scolds recited vivid stories of justice meted out, reminding all that disobedience bore heavy consequences. Fear of retribution traveled faster than any army, allowing chieftains to govern through whispered warnings and shared memory. Laurels and sacrifice stones anchored Viking justice in the sacred. A laurel, planted firmly in a forest glade, symbolized the divine legitimacy of earthly law. Villagers gathered, raising hands in solemn oath, binding themselves to the code under heaven's gaze. These rituals sanctified punishments, transforming legal sentences into acts of cosmic balance. Symbols sanctified the law, rooting earthly justice in the sacred. Freitas, or her counterpart, commanded the assembly's attention with steady eyes and a commanding voice. Holding the rune-carved law rod, she wielded authority equal to any sword. Her judgments balanced harsh penalties with social necessity, her presence a living symbol of law and ritual intertwined. Her word carried weight beyond mere command. It was the foundation of order in a volatile world. Kinship networks were both protective alliances and fault lines. Families feasted together, forging loyalty and mutual defense, yet behind closed doors, whispered plots and secret meetings fanned the flames of suspicion. Trust was precious and fragile, a currency that could buy peace or spark rebellion. Kinship bound loyalty, but bred suspicion. Trust was a precious currency. In this world, social mechanisms substituted for standing armies. Peaceful village scenes often gave way to quiet inspections or stern warnings from lawkeepers. Violence was a last resort. Trust and terror ensured obedience without constant swordplay. Authority was maintained through social pressure and ritualized control, proving effective in fragile communities where force alone could not govern. Trust and terror ensured obedience without the sword's constant presence. Dr. Marta Engelbrecht explains how, in a landscape of fragile alliances, social networks and ritual created order and prevented chaos. Law was not just enforced, but performed, blending fear and trust into a durable bond. In a world where alliances shifted and threats loomed, trust, enforced by fear, was the strongest bond. The rune-carved law rod stands tall in a quiet forest glade, sunlight filtering through leaves to illuminate its weathered surface. It is a silent sentinel and a beacon of order, signaling that no one, neither noble nor serf, is above the code. Here, law was carved into the very land, an unyielding promise, etched in wood and spirit. Cold steel fences loom over a prison yard, where inmates move silently beneath leaden skies. Watchtowers stand sentinel, their guards vigilant amid barbed wire coils. The air carries a tense stillness, faces etched with isolation and frustration. This modern fortress echoes a timeless reality. Exile, segregation, and control remain tools of justice. Though separated by centuries, today's prisons reflect the Viking practice of outlawry, where exclusion from community meant social death. The grim walls contain more than bodies. They hold the weight of societal punishment and fractured lives. The Viking outlaw, known as or Man of the Woods, was cast out, stripped of law and protection. Today, deportation and house arrest serve similar functions from their communities and severing social ties. Immigration, detention centers, and surveillance cameras monitor those isolated from society, a modern exile. The pain of separation, loss of belonging, and vulnerability remain constant across time. Though laws have changed, the human cost of banishment, being cut off from support and safety, echoes the ancient world's harshest punishment. Viking punishments often involved brutal mutilations, cropping ears, slashing noses to mark and control offenders. Today's societies reject such physical maiming, but grapple with bodily control through measures like chemical castration, especially for sex offenders. Courtroom debates and protests reveal deep tensions about bodily autonomy and justice. While modern laws distance themselves from overt violence, control over the body remains a contentious and symbolic battleground. The question persists: how far should punishment extend into the flesh? Cancel culture operates as a digital think court, where reputation is weaponized and social judgment rendered in public view. Scrolling feeds flood with hashtags, viral videos, and headlines condemning individuals, often without due process. The court of public opinion is swift, brutal, and often irreversible. This modern spectacle resembles Viking public punishments, where social standing was shattered openly, and fear reinforced through communal witnessing. Digital shaming enforces norms, but at what cost to mercy and rehabilitation? Justice systems today grapple between punitive and restorative models. Community circles, victim-offender dialogues, and prison education programs aimed to heal and rebuild trust. These approaches contrast starkly with spectacle-driven deterrence of the past, offering pathways to repair social bonds rather than merely instill fear. The evolution from punishment as public spectacle to justice as healing signals a growing understanding. True order arises not from terror but from restoration and accountability. Dr. Emma Clark explains that while public punishments may deter wrongdoing, they often sow deep psychological scars. Archival footage of executions parallels modern images of solitary confinement, both breeding trauma that reverberates across generations. The spectacle of punishment leaves invisible wounds, eroding community and individual well-being. This enduring harm challenges societies to reconsider the true cost of justice enacted through fear. Professor Navin Patel elaborates on social media's role as a relentless enforcer of norms through online shaming. Viral posts can lead to ostracism, mental health crises, and lasting stigma. The digital justice system marks individuals permanently, with few avenues for redemption. Phones glow with anxious faces reacting to waves of condemnation, underscoring the immense psychological weight carried by the publicly shamed. This new arena of punishment wields power as absolute as any physical sentence. The Viking blood eagle was a ritualized public execution designed to inspire terror and enforce social order. Today's viral executions on social media serve a parallel function, instilling fear and signaling consequences for transgression. Split screens show the stark contrast. One side, a brutal reenactment; the other, scrolling feeds of relentless online harassment. Though methods evolve, the underlying intent persists to control through fear and public spectacle, shaping behavior with harsh social sanctions. From ancient blood rituals to modern digital trials and prison yards, punishment adapts, but remains rooted in control. Scenes blender, blood eagles, shadow fades into Twitter feeds, courtroom gavel strikes, and steel prison fences. Justice changes its face, but history warns that punishment without compassion fractures society. The challenge endures: to balance accountability with mercy, and to build systems that heal rather than destroy. We return to the fog-shrouded gallows, now empty except for a lone wooden stake, dew sparkling faintly in the early dawn light. This silent structure stands as a witness to the harsh and unyielding laws that once shaped Viking life. The soft rustle of wind stirs the cold air, while in the distance, a raven's call cuts through the stillness, a reminder of the past's lingering presence. Freytis, older now, her face lined by time yet steady with resolve, brushes moss from the weathered wood of the gallows. Once a formidable voice of justice, she carries a complex burden, pride in the order maintained alongside sorrow for the lives forever altered by punishment. For Vikings, justice was both a sword and shield, but it often cut too deeply into the fabric of their society. In a modern courtroom, a jurist closes a gavel-struck transcript, pausing in quiet reflection. The balance of mercy and retribution continues to challenge societies today, echoing the ancient struggles witnessed here centuries ago. The scene fades between the stark Viking execution and the solemn modern court, connecting past and present systems of law. The Norse legacy warns us that power wielded without compassion can sow ruin. Their laws forged order but left fractures etched deeply into society's soul. True justice is measured not by the severity of punishment, but by the presence of mercy. Stone tablets inscribed with runes give way to weathered lawbooks, linking old codes to current ideals. What does justice mean to you? In a world constantly seeking order, where do you draw the line for those who hold the scales of judgment? The balance tips gently as if awaiting your answer. A raven lands upon the gallows beam, its sharp core breaking the dawn's silence. Light glints on steel and stone, catching the edge of an ancient sword, a symbol of both past strife and future hope. From history's shadows to the promise of tomorrow, may we choose justice tempered by humanity.